Honestly, I thought for a moment, especially when we were attached to that propeller, that this was going to be it. We're going to be, because when you land in that water, let's say you're just in your swimsuit and you're in water that cold, you've got 7 minutes and then you're going to die. You're going to drown, you're going to die. If you're in your Mustang suit and a wetsuit, it's half an hour.
Welcome to the SGV Master Key, a show where you will hear personal stories of triumph over failures and how others successfully navigated the unique landscape that is the San Gabriel Valley. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we have chosen the San Gabriel Valley for our home or businesses or both. We believe it is the people and small businesses that make this community great, and we love to share their stories with you. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at sgvmasterkey.com. Here are the hosts for the show, Russell Mono and Scott Warmoth.
All right, welcome to another episode of the SGV Master Key. If you are a returning listener or a new listener, we invite you to join us in this conversation for the next hour or so. We were speaking before, Scott, about television, and I know you don't watch a whole lot of television, but I actually don't own a television. But when I did watch television, most of what I watched was Discovery Channel, History Channel, and the Food Network. Those were my shows.
Yeah. Action, fun, romance,
yes.
in faraway places, right?
Yeah, and I love that you could explore different lands and see what other people were doing and go places that I may or may not have a chance to go.
Well, when I was in high school and we were graduating, and I had a good friend who said his goal in life was to be a photographer for National Geographic magazine. And I thought, wow, that is exciting. That would be, what a life, journalism and photography and travel. And, you're more of an adventurer than I am. You will go outdoors. For me, there's an old joke, slow room service is roughing it for me. But okay. You're more into that. But to me, it's, and I think for everybody, just the romance, the thought of, going somewhere and being in the middle of some exciting adventure really captivates. So to have the opportunity to meet somebody who actually gets to do that, that is what they do, is a great opportunity.
Right. For the audience, we're excited to have this conversation and bring this to you. Our guest today is Glenn Evans. He's a director of photography, but I'm going to call him an action adventure videographer because that's what I think he does. So Glenn, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
So that is your title. What does that mean? What do you do?
So basically what that means is that I will be hired and be in charge of hiring the crew and going out into the middle of nowhere, be it an ancient ruin, the desert, the ocean, or an endangered animal, and I will bring the image home. So I'll work creatively with a producer a lot of times, or there'll be a director out in the field, but together we'll kind of come up with how we're going to capture this for the audience, how we're going to film this animal, how we're going to find this animal or this ancient ruin. And it's great because it's a lot of creativity. It's a lot of great photography, composition, and art. And then also just the fun of having the problems or not problems, but the challenges, I should say, to just fit in that environment and try and get the job done in the most beautiful way possible.
And as I understand it, all your work is international?
For the most part, yeah. I do quite a bit of international work, especially lately. But, I have been working quite a bit in Alaska, doing some really creative work there. I got to film an incredible team of guys that are searching for the Lost Dutchman's Mine in Arizona, in the Superstition Mountain Range there. They're still trying to find it.
Wow.
And it's got quite a history.
So Superstition Mine.
Oh, yeah. So the Superstition Mountains, those, of course, all in the United States. But, yeah, generally you'll find my work. I just worked in Tanzania, the Ngorongoro Crater. filming a hyena program. They're very special animals. A lot of people don't know much about hyenas. It's kind of crazy, but they are very fascinating. I've worked quite a bit in Egypt and the ruins there. Of course, we all know the Great Pyramids and things. One of the most fascinating things I've done of recent is I filmed a documentary about searching for the lineage of the DNA on the Shroud of Turin. That's supposedly the wrapping of, they say Christ, but the scientists will never say that. They'll say it's the man in the shroud. And we went in with the Oxford University and traced the lineage of where the blood on that shroud comes from, and it's pretty fascinating.
Well, that is fascinating, and I would like to. I mean, we both would like to get into details on your adventures. Can we start at the beginning briefly so that people know where you came from and how you got into what you're doing? I understand you grew up in Oregon.
I did. I grew up in Oregon on a blueberry farm. And my father was a professor, a teacher. My mother was a nurse, but they loved blueberries, and they thought, hey, what better way to teach our kids how to do things well, especially when they don't want to do them, than to have them work on a farm, because it was a lot of hard work, a lot of early mornings.
You were out picking the blueberries, and was it also a you-pick blueberry farm where people could come pick?
Well, we'd have our friends come and pick, but generally, it's funny you say, because we would pick for canneries and things like this, like famous ones, like, Smucker's Jam and things like this would buy our berries from the cannery. But we ended up becoming more of a fresh market, which has to be picked by hand in order to sell. You can't pick it by machine. So we would sell quite a few of our blueberries at the Portland State Farmers Market in Portland, Oregon. We still have a booth there today.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, my mom.
Oh, so you still have the farm is still there?
It's still there, and
Hillsboro,
it's growing.
Oregon.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yep. Evans Blueberries Farm and Provisions is what it is, and we have ducks and turkeys and chickens and blueberries and honey.
Oh, that is great. My parents grew up on a farm in Oregon, and I would visit that farm, into my youth. But then my grandparents sold it and moved to Florida. But it was a huge farm, and it just, life on a farm is not easy. To the day they sold the property, they had an outhouse. It was
Wow.
They didn't even have in plumbing inside. But so that's fascinating to grow up like that. And then you went to study at the University of Oregon, and then went on to photography school.
I did. I went to University of Oregon for just a few years, and I was making movies too, because my father ran a toy company that had a lot of photographers involved. It was called Viewmaster, and they would make these 3D photography shots for the reels for the toy they were selling, but it was all big movies and stuff, And I was fascinated. My dad would get like a lot of cool movie posters like E.T. or Raiders of the Lost Ark, Last Crusade, basically. So I was really enamored with that. And so I got into photography very early as a kid, but mostly video, making movies. Like he bought a VHS camera one year, and my friends and I would go out, and luckily my high school, for some reason, had an editing system there, and we could shoot on VHS and bump it up to what they called 3/4 inch video and make these movies. And so that really got me started. And so when I got accepted to University of Oregon, I went there for a few years, and I was a telecommunications and film and creative arts writer, major and minor. But then I went to a school called Brooks Institute of Photography in Santa Barbara, and that was basically one of the leading adventure photography schools in the nation. They would do underwater photography. They had their own boat in the harbor. A lot of documentarians and other photographers would go to school there, and it was a really, really great environment to grow, and it was a good foot in the door to be part of these adventures that I am part of now.
Wow, I wish I would have heard of something like that. That sounds so interesting. I've never heard that you could go study that in school. Wow.
It was like the Hogwarts of adventure photography school for me. So I just took advantage of those pieces that they offered to try to, because I was really into underwater cinematography when I was in school. And when I got out of school, that's what I was known for, and that's what I would do. I worked for people. They were trying to make at the time a Channel Islands aquarium, and it had people behind it like Ted Danson and Dr. Sylvia Earle from, she's a very well-renowned oceanographer and scientist. And they were looking for kids to put footage in for like a video to support what they were going to try to make in Santa Barbara. So they came to Brooks, and Ralph Clevenger was the teacher there. He said, well, I do have one student that's doing exclusively video of this marine sanctuary, the National Marine Sanctuary. And so I got like a small grant, and they took my footage, and Ted Danson narrated the piece that I'd made. And so when I got out of school, I had this fantastic small documentary narrated by Ted Danson with my footage. So that really helped me like start my underwater career. And then since then I did like a Nike commercial underwater with Art Center, a lot of master student stuff, a Lincoln Navigator spot. And then I actually wound up in Las Vegas at the Hard Rock Hotel filming Aerosmith underwater when I was just a kid at the Billboard Awards, like the 96 Billboard Awards, when they were doing Pink is my favorite color with the United States synchronized swimming team. So there I was with Steven Tyler underwater. I was like 23 years old, and it was very, very, very exciting for me.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. So we like to at least inform our listeners what the connection is between our guests and the San Gabriel Valley. So what is that connection?
Well, my connection is I've been living here in Pasadena since 1996. I came to live here because I had a lot of friends attending the Art Center College of Design, which has been here for a very long time. I think, and one of the co-founders or founders of Art Center at the time or would teach was Ansel Adams, I think, something like this.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, in fact check, it seems like a long time ago, but anyway, the school's very old, and Art Center is just a very, very great school. And so I was excited to have a lot of friends that were going here. And so when I graduated Brooks, this is where I came. And I've been living here close to these mountains and eating the delicious food at all the great restaurants here, and just enjoying all the architecture and the history of Pasadena, because that's what I really love. And this part of Los Angeles for me has most of that. You know, if you look at the houses here, there's lots of arts and crafts movement, you know, quite a few great architects like Green and Green I appreciate, and just even the trees, and you can just tell how old this town is, and I really like that.
Yeah, it seems like you have had an idea of what you wanted to do from a very young age, or at least before you decided on learning this in school. So you got a break with the documentary Ted Danson, and what happened next?
So what happened next was, my goodness, like a lot of kids when they come out of school, they think, hey, I'm Steven Spielberg, I'm Roger Deakins. No, it's not true. I mean, you may have done some great things, but a lot of working professionals want to see that you've started from the ground and worked your way up. So I ended up getting a job at a rental house. You know, I started learning cameras by being around them. I started working as a production assistant, getting coffee for people, being a grip electric, doing the dirty work, running cables under bleachers and things, and just trying to work on whatever show that I could, but still maintaining my own projects, doing my own projects at the level of where I wanted to be, you know, for free or for other graduating students at Art Center.
And what were those projects?
Like, for example, like the projects that I would do on my own, I would try to find any independent film that I could that was a low budget but wanted an excited kid that knew all the equipment and how to make it. So a lot of those things were like, you know, commercials for Art Center students at the master degree level, shooting on 35. A lot of those would be, you know, working maybe at a lower capacity, but for, you know, a great professional that's done quite a bit of work, you know, on a movie or a mini series or a comedy show. And then through the camera rental house, I would work on things like The Bachelor. I would work on The Man Show. I would either run lights, and then I would start to do studio camera work on whatever I could find, you know, game shows, live studio shows, talk shows. I worked on Sharon Osbourne for a second, you know. I worked on quite a few of these studio shows, but mostly to make money and gain experience and to meet people. And then my big break was that kind of started me off where I am now, is I ended up getting a job as a director and as the director of photography for this Animal Planet show called The Aquanauts. And it basically featured these attractive, young, smart, educated people talking about, ocean preservation and animal preservation and animals. And it was a very fast, like documentary, like MTV style type show on Animal Planet. And it went one series, and it was made by a company called Village Roadshow, which is very famous. And then basically all of those producers and everybody from that show left from there. But the great thing about that was they'd moved to other production companies, and they knew my name and liked me and liked my work. So a lot of times just word of mouth was how I would continue to get other jobs.
Well, it's a difficult business, though, isn't it? I mean, you're always needing to find another gig, you might call it, right?
It's very competitive, you know, and you can have the most wonderful looking work. You can have the extensive resume, but what's really hard to compete with is the person that is going to be hiring everyone, but who is friends with and knows a particular individual. That goes a long way in this business, because when you're out in the middle of the field, in the middle of Africa or India or somewhere far away, you don't want to have an issue or somebody that's not going to get along with someone. So you do tend to hire your friends quite a bit, people that you know, people that you trust, because your name is on the line. Everyone's name is on the line. And if you're producing a show or hiring people, you're responsible for making those decisions. And so you're going to go with who you know, maybe even over someone that's been doing it longer. So you really got to pay attention, get to know as many people as you can, and make friends with these people. And then you'll find yourself very, very busy in this business, I guarantee.
When was it that you got your break?
So I would say one of my big breaks would be around 2001. I met a famous man named Jeff Corwin. Jeff Corwin, who's been a great friend of mine ever since. He's been very well known for filming with animals, filming with a lot of reptiles in the beginning, snakes, poisonous snakes, things like this. He is far and wide known for all kinds of preservation, animal research, and his big show that he had was called the Jeff Corwin Experience on Animal Planet. And I had worked with another cameraman. He was a British cameraman, but was American, named Pierce Bath. And Pierce Bath had a family. He was a little bit older, a lot of experience, and I learned a lot from him. And he thought that I had the energy and what it took to kind of sort of take his place behind the camera for that show. And so sure enough, I met with the company, I met with Jeff, and then before I knew it, the very first show I did with him was in the Everglades in Florida, filming alligators. And it was quite an experience. And it was, we had been together in quite a few countries, you name it, Nepal, filming Asiatic lions, filming other real lions in Kenya and preservation, polar bears in the Arctic. We've filmed together.
All this with Corwin?
All with Jeff Corwin. And I actually worked with him and still work with him now, but extensively. I worked with Jeff for, I would say, from 2001 till 2010. He left to go do some things for CNN, which was great for him. I wanted to still do documentary work. I wanted to explore. I wanted to do ancient ruins. I wanted to see the pyramids. I wanted to go to study the Mayan ruins in Guatemala. I wanted to go to the Great Wall of China. Jeff was all about those things, but he had signed up to do a show for CNN with Anderson Cooper. And so he kind of went his way. We remained friends. And I went more of the documentary route with more endangered animal preservations, which then led me to be part of a show called Whale Wars.
Yeah, we were talking about that. I've seen Whale Wars, and I was mentioning to Scott what I saw was the fleets going after the Japanese in like Antarctica. So you were on those ships? I
was.
Wow.
And it wasn't. It was mostly the Japanese whalers, and it's definitely not. How can I say? And even the Sea Shepherds will say this: they are not against Japan, and we weren't allowed as camera people to call ourselves Sea Shepherds. We weren't affiliated. We were just filming the Sea Shepherds. We had to be reminded to know that we were there. We were close with the Sea Shepherds. We supported everything that they would do, and we would help them. But we ourselves were not Sea Shepherds. We were a crew for Animal Planet there to film them protecting the whales only being whaled in the protected area of Antarctica, the marine sanctuary there. And Japan was the government that decided that they felt that they could go down there and harvest these whales.
What I remember of that show was that they were doing it under the guise of research, right? But they were actually just harvesting these animals?
Well, so they were saying that they were doing marine science research. And, they probably were. And they were saying that they were using the whales for food, for, to feed children at school and things like this. I mean, it's a cultural thing. And, Japan is a powerful Japan is a powerful country. Japan is a fantastic nation. The only reason why Sea Shepherd was there getting in the way of it at all is because they were doing it in a place that no one is supposed to be fishing if you want to sustain the environment and protect the oceans. And so that was the only reason. Sea Shepherd really has no vendetta against Japan. Anybody that was down there whaling or doing anything or putting a long line net or something illegally, whether it be Norway or even the United States, Sea Shepherd probably would have done something about it down there too. So we were just there to document them. We had Japanese people on our boat that also were against what those particular whaling people were doing down there. But it was a very, very dangerous time. There were some high highs and low lows filming that show. I had a couple times where I thought, maybe this is it,
Well, I'm curious. So how much time would you spend? Take us through your life with this particular project. How did it start? When did you go to? How did you get there? What was a day in the life like? What was the project like? How long did it last? I'm curious about this.
So I ended up leaving Thanksgiving Day, 2010, and I did not come back until the end of March, beginning of April, 2011. So it was a very long time to be gone, and especially during the holidays, New Year's, Christmas, New Year's, everything away from my family. I spent a total of 94 days at sea in Antarctica.
When you were not at sea, where were you?
Oh, no. We were only at sea.
You were only at sea.
I was on the game show host, Bob Barker.
Yeah.
He's a huge animal activist.
Right.
And
yeah.
so he donated a lot of money to Sea Shepherd, millions of dollars, in fact. And so they ended up buying a old Norwegian oil tanker, and they named the boat the Bob Barker. And it was the boat that could hold, or the ship that could hold the most fuel. So they would use the Bob Barker to fuel up the other ships and to stay out the whole time without going back to port. So,
well, you didn't have to get supplies for 94 days.
No,
Wow.
and this is fascinating. So the other boat named the Steve Irwin, or I should say ship actually, the Steve Irwin was the ship that was supposed to resupply the Bob Barker with food and everything else. But we had gotten separated. And then there was quite a bit of weather between us and the Steve Irwin. So we never once got supplied because the Steve Irwin couldn't reach us. Because so I'll tell you the game plan of what Sea Shepherd was trying to do with the whaling illegally down there. So what they would try to do is they would try to find the factory vessel, the Nishin Maru. And once they found that factory vessel, they could just take the Bob Barker and stay right behind it. And if the Japanese, they had a couple different whaling vessels that were very new, very modern, the Yushin Maru 1 and 2 and 3, they would harpoon a whale and then load it onto the factory vessel. But if there was a ship in the way, they couldn't load it. And a whale will only last so long, even in the icy waters of Antarctica, it will spoil. So they won't whale if their factory vessel is blocked. So that was the whole mission. So the Bob Barker was the one that could stay out the longest, that would be the ship to block anything being loaded onto the Nishimaru. But first you have to find that vessel. So it was very difficult because it's like finding a needle in a haystack. And a lot of times if the Yushin Marus, the other vessels that would find the Bob Barker, they would just sacrifice a whaling vessel to put a bead on the Bob Barker so they knew where it was. They could report to the factory ship where we were, and then we would never find it. So what we had to do was get that ship off of our tail. So on New Year's Day, we got off on the small rafts. We hid behind an iceberg. The Bob Barker took off. I was aboard the small raft with these other brave sea shepherds, another camera guy named Russell Burr, who was on the other small raft. And we then tailed the whaling vessel that was tailing us, and we put a tracker on it. And then we had to distract that whaling vessel so the Bob Barker could make a turn and get off the radar. And that took 50 miles for the Bob Barker to get off the radar. So we had to use rope or the Sea Shepherds would use rope that they would just put under the ship that had metal and things that would get wrapped up in the propeller. They were using some kind of fermented oil that they could throw, flares, all this stuff. Meanwhile, the whaling vessels were shooting us on the small rafts with fire hoses and things and throwing pieces of bamboo at us. Oh. And so we're filming it. And we were running around using the prop fowlers, they call it, and one was floating in the water. So we picked it up, and then we got in front of the vessel, and the Sea Shepherds put the rope in the water, and I'm filming them do this, but one of the Sea Shepherds had taken the other end of the rope and wrapped it around the roll bar on our French military grade rib vessel, inflatable raft, and he thought that it would just unwrap and go into their prop, but it didn't. It tied into a knot on our raft, and so now we're tied to this propeller of this whaling vessel, and it's dragging us underwater.
Oh my God!
And so everybody fell down, and all of a sudden we're up to our knees in water. And finally, somebody in the icy water cut the rope, and then we floored it and got all the water out of our raft. But our radio was fried with the seawater, and we had a lot of issues. But then we'd gotten word that the Bob Barker had made it off the radar. So then we went to escape. And we were supposed to rendezvous with the Bob Barker at a certain point, but suddenly the raft that I was on, the floorboard started tearing from the pontoon. 7 or 8 layers of military-grade neoprene just tearing away. So we were taking on all this water, and we were running out of fuel. So all we could do was call on a sat phone to the Bob Barker and hide overnight behind an iceberg and wait for them to come get us because we couldn't go anywhere. Both boats would not make it safely. So there we were, and they said, okay, well, we're still 70 miles away from you guys because we were supposed to meet at a certain point. And so we had to wait over 5 hours for the Bob Barker, and we'd been out for 7. We had 2 people hyperthermic, and we were hiding behind an iceberg waiting for our ship to pick us up overnight.
How many people were on that raft?
So there were 4 people per raft, so 8 people total.
And you were one of those that, and you had all your camera gear. And what were the temperatures, water and air, and how did you protect yourself and your gear?
So I had a spare camera in a bag, and I would bring that out because my other camera basically shut off. The fire hoses were too much for it, and I had some protective stuff on it, and things, but it was just very difficult with the lens and the camera, and it basically gave up. So I was then using my small backup camera that I had brought, especially to document us waiting for our ship to come get us. The water was 28 degrees. But the wind chill factor outside, we were in minus 20 degree temperature outside. And we were all wearing these protective Mustang suits with wetsuits underneath, and then long underwear, neoprene or polypropylene underneath those wetsuits to stay warm. But when we set out, we only thought we were going to be out there for about 3 hours or so. We ended up being out there for over 12 and close to 13. And while we were waiting behind the iceberg, that everybody kind of had too much time to think, I think. So when you're not busy, you start to get a little bit freaked out. So it was a scary time.
What was that like? I mean, totally isolated.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, my goodness, I was thinking about my mom and my family and how did I make a mistake coming here? And is this going to be it? And we actually had 2 people hypothermic. And it's interesting because they were wet beneath their suits. And a lot of it was because, if you have to go to the bathroom, number one, and you're out there, some people just decided to go because they knew that maybe in a few hours they could get on the ship and take a shower and this and that, because it's hard when you're trying to distract a whaling vessel that's shooting fire hoses at you just to pull over and take a leak, So a lot of the people that were hypothermic, they went to the bathroom in their wetsuits and they were wet underneath. And then that caused them to be cold because the most important thing is you have to stay dry. And also too, people would sweat and get cold, So when you stop moving and you're sitting there in your raft and the wind is blowing on you and you're in ankle deep water, and there's no food except for maybe a Cliff Bar or something that you bring with you, it was a little bit rough. And we had some people that, my congratulations to Potsy and Gary Stokes and a lot of the other crew members that were on those rafts, Russell Burr, myself, everybody. And everybody did great, very, very solid, mentally strong people making good decisions. But we did have two people when we finally got aboard the Bob Barker, when it found us behind the iceberg. And we had to stay behind the iceberg so it could find us on the radar because that was the only way it could locate us. They came and picked us up, and sure enough, two people were hypothermic. My feet were drenched. I was completely soaked, and oh man, my feet, I just remember how bad they hurt. And I remember when I got on board, the Sea Shepherd, they took my boots off, and this lady goes, "Okay, I'm going to lift up my shirt, and I want you to put your feet on my belly, and I'm going to put my sweater over your feet." And so I put my feet on her stomach, and we both screamed, and but I tell you, I've never been so happy to be back on that ship,
Was there anything in your life that had prepared you for that?
That, not really. I mean, honestly, I thought for a moment, especially when we were attached to that propeller, that this was going to be it. We're going to be, because, when you land in that water, let's say you're just in your swimsuit and you're in water that cold, you've got 7 minutes and then you're going to die. You're going to drown, you're going to die. If you're in your Mustang suit and a wetsuit, it's half an hour.
When they were shooting at you, the water from the hoses, were they intending to kill you or just drive you off? Or what was their expectation, do you think? And what was your thought?
Well, when we would approach the ship, they would start releasing this sound in English, saying, "Please stay away from our ship. Warning, warning," like this. And then those were also connected to something called an LRAD, which is a sound wave that they can launch at you, and it actually makes you fall down and maybe feel a little bit sick. Yeah, they had that technology, LRAD technology. But the fire hoses, I think, obviously, I don't think they were to hurt us or kill us. And I think they were just to deter us and to get us out of there and to get us uncomfortable, But I mean, it was so loud. I remember the fire hose hitting our helmets that we were wearing, and your ears would ring, and it wasn't pleasant, And it was hard on the cameras too.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I have a brand new appreciation for the footage that was captured, in that show. Wow, what a story. That is really incredible.
It was hard. We were nominated for an Emmy Award that year for the Primetime Emmy Awards for Best Photography for a nonfiction program. So I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the team. We didn't win because that beautiful show, Frozen Planet, by David Attenborough, it won, and rightfully so. I mean, they're waiting a year for a narwhal horn to come out of the ice, in slow motion. Beautiful show. We lost to them, but it was quite a memorable experience for me, and it did a lot for my career to be part of such a project that was really going all the way and being in an environment that was just so rare for anybody to watch,
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story with us and the listeners. I want to get into other shows that you've done and all of your other adventures. I know we won't have time to really get into them, but we ask each guest to bring an item of significance to the show. What did you bring today?
Well, I love treasure, I love things that are very, very old. I love art. I love modern art too, which, excites me a lot, street art. But I also love things that are very old, because when I look at something that's, a few hundred years old, to me, there's an energy there. Like, ever since I was a kid, my favorite movie has been Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that really put fire in my eyes when I saw that film. And so I really, if I could be anybody in this world, it would be Indiana Jones with a camera. That would be my dream, and I've really sought after that. So I got to work with the Cousteau family, with Philippe Cousteau and his wife Ashlyn on their show Caribbean Pirate Treasure. And we went to some treasure shipwrecks and things, and we worked with quite a few people, some famous people like Mel Fisher, who found the Atocha off the Florida Keys and was bringing up all of this gold and this silver and things from the Spanish galleons down there.
Yeah, I watched a documentary on that. That was fascinating.
So I got to meet the Fisher family and with the Cousteaus. And so what I have brought is a piece of Mexican-Spanish history tied into American history. So it's a very significant piece that I've brought. And should I just pull it out here?
Yeah.
So let me just tell you quickly just a little bit about it, some background. So back in the 1700s, in 1784, New Orleans was a harbor that was ran by the Spanish. Spanish actually ran New Orleans. But the Spaniards did not have a hard currency to support the harbor. They would use paper money that was easily counterfeited and not worth much, and they were sort of losing New Orleans. So at the time, you have basically the King of Spain, Carlos III, and it's great. There's a statue of Carlos III actually in Alvera Street in downtown LA.
Oh yeah,
and those Spanish restaurants there and stuff. He commissioned a Spanish galleon loaded with pieces of 8 to be printed in Mexico, but then sail around and get to New Orleans to substantiate the economy in New Orleans. But guess what? The galleon, named the El Cazador, it never made it. It sank in 300 feet of water off the coast of New Orleans. So there it sat at the bottom of the sea.
That would have been in 1794?
1784, actually.
84? Okay.
50 miles off the coast of New Orleans. All of these pieces of 8 sitting at the bottom of the sea. And it wasn't until 2002 that the ship was discovered by a fishing vessel called the Mistake.
Really?
And the Mistake sunk their nets down, and all of a sudden, the first mate or whoever started yelling, "Coins, coins!" And all of these coins started falling onto the deck. And so I brought today a piece of 8, an actual coin from that Spanish galleon wreck.
Wow, that
El
is
Cazador.
fascinating.
You want to see
Yeah,
it?
Yes.
Well, here's the certificate of authenticity here. I don't know if you want to have a look or read that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this ship, El Cazador, was 300 feet at the bottom of the, that's the Gulf, isn't it?
Yes, 50 miles off the coast of New Orleans. Yes.
Right. And it was there for more than 200 years.
218 years, I think, before they found it. And here's the important thing. So guess what? The galleon never made it, which is then the point where the Spaniards sold Louisiana to the French for very cheap, which then the French
US
sold
spot.
it.
Yeah.
And that's the Louisiana Purchase.
Right.
Had that galleon made it, maybe the Spaniards might never have sold Louisiana to the French.
Wow.
And
that
so
is
maybe that
history.
purchase might have never happened.
Wow.
And so here I have an actual...
What was the value of all of the
that's a good question.
treasure on this?
I don't know, but there it is. That's an actual piece of 8 from that wrecked Spanish galleon.
Wow. Underwater for 200 plus years.
That's it.
When did you get this?
I got it 2018. And you'll see the date. It's 1783 on that coin.
This is amazing.
I mean, imagine how many hands touched that.
Yeah.
And then all the time it stayed in the bottom of the sea. And silver is really, I learned a lot working with the Cousteaus on this Pirate Treasure show. Silver underwater is black, actually, because it's not like gold. Gold will keep its luster under salt water or seawater. Silver will start to break down. So you have to find these very, very dark black coins in an environment that is like blue and black to begin with. So it's a
Right.
little bit difficult, but and then they have to use a process of electrolysis with water and stuff to get the corrosion off of it. But here you can see too, the pillars, and then you can see basically the seal of Spain, and then Carlos's face on the front.
Wow, that is a very valuable piece. Do you have any idea of what it's worth?
Well, I know it's worth, this particular coin I know is worth over $300 per coin. And they found thousands of them. If it was gold, obviously, it would have been worth a lot more. Mm-hmm. But and it's funny, they call them pieces of 8 too. They used to break these pieces up into smaller pieces to pay people. So you would have, I brought a replica here. If I was going to hire you back then to do something, and I had a piece of 8 like this, I could pay you in any one of these small pieces for the job.
Really?
A half.
You would break it off of the.
That's it, and that's where the name for 25 cents or 2 bits.
I see.
Right.
Oh, that makes sense.
2 bits of coin came from there. But I wanted to show you too.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just, and how would they cut it?
That's a good question. I don't know how they would actually cut it.
There's 3 pieces here.
Yeah. Here it is. So this is an example of a piece. This is actually also another piece of 8, a real that's real. This, though, was found in Peru underground. And you'll notice the difference, because if you look at the coin that I showed you, it starts to break down in a different way. You can see that the edges of the coin, they're getting a little bit thin, but typically the corrosion starts with the whole coin. Here, if you look at this one, this is actually a piece of 8, because if you look closely, you can see that this is the seal of Spain here, with the castles and the dragons here. But this is thick in the middle and thin throughout the edges, which means it's been in the ground. That's from Peru, actually. That's a piece of 8 from Peru.
So the term piece of 8 was, the piece of 8 was the original coin you showed us, right? And then there would be pieces of a piece of 8.
Correct. They would break pieces off, and it's 8 reals or reales.
Okay. That's what the 8
and even though it's Spanish coins, I know the Portuguese still call their money reais.
Wow. In all my childhood and all my, watching these treasure hunting shows, I always imagine what it would be like to find treasure, but, to hold a piece of treasure in my hand it's amazing. I'm so thrilled that you brought that.
Oh, this is Spanish treasure, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
You are holding a piece of Spanish treasure. I get goosebumps even now. I'm getting it right now. I feel it.
Right.
I love it. So whenever I get a chance to work on a show that deals with treasure or some kind of legend or mystery, I am all about it. I will jump on that so fast, because it's one of my favorite things, and it's, I think it's important to find something that really gives you a feeling in your heart, something that gives you the goosebumps, So for me, this is it. I love it so much. So I wanted to bring it with me today to share with you guys.
Thank you so much. The joy and passion comes through in your face and your expression of the joy. I really want to get into the rest of your adventures, or at least some of them. But before that, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The legal process can be intimidating. You don't know where to start, and you're unsure of what to expect. The attorneys and staff at the law offices of Scott Wormuth have been serving the San Gabriel Valley for over 35 years, helping people just like you navigate through the legal process and ensuring you're treated fairly. You can find them at law888.com or call 626-282-6868. That's 626-282-6868.
All right, we're back with Glenn. Glenn, thank you so much for bringing that literal treasure with you and sharing that with us and with our audience. So you've done more shows than just Whale Wars. What are some of the other shows that stand out in your mind?
So I've done a lot of things that I'm proud of. We just got done talking about treasure. We talked about whale wars before, traveling, going. I was really part of this fantastic documentary that even it still airs today. We shot it in 2017. They've aired it on Easter Sunday every single year ever since we made it on History Channel. And it's called The Jesus Strand, A Search for DNA. So as I told you about the treasure and the kinds of things that I like, here's a fascinating example of, ancient architecture meets history meets art, So this documentary, it's fascinating. Oxford University is the leading university when it comes to genetics and carbon dating. And so whenever you find something really old, like in Egypt and all in other parts of the world, a lot of times they will send it to Oxford to get, dated with its carbon dating. So they came up with a method called old DNA method. That's what they named it. Because I think the way the story is somebody found a frozen horse in Siberia. And the frozen horse was 20,000 years old. And Oxford University was able to authenticate this horse and also use this horse to find other horses that may be related to it. And then this technology goes to, they found, I think in England, they found a king, I think it was King George III. He had a gimp leg. I could be wrong about the name of the king. I mean, we could research it quickly, but the principle is he had one leg that was shorter than the other. And when they were in London digging up a parking lot, they found a crypt, and they opened the crypt, and sure enough, they find this particular king buried down there, and they knew who he was by his leg being shorter one than the other. And so because they knew his family was still alive, they could take their blood DNA or swab their mouth and match it with the bones of this particular king that they'd found. And so Oxford University was very creative in saying, well, listen, if we can do that with this horse and this particular king, why don't we try the blood on the Shroud of Turin, one of the most famous controversial artifacts linked to Christianity in the world, Some people believe in it, some people don't. When we were working with these scientists, they would never say that it was the blood of Jesus. They would just say the man in the shroud. Because the Shroud of Turin supposedly was the cloth that was wrapped around Christ's body as it was then loaded into the tomb. It disappeared, and then it arrived in France hundreds of years later. So most people think that it's a fake, but no one's been able to prove it. So these scientists set out to find the truth, but they paired them. The show that we did was with a theologist, someone who believed in it, and a scientist who believed in science. So they wanted that dichotomy, the kind of like the two contrasting beliefs in the show, So I was just there to film it, but it was really fascinating. We got to travel all over the world. We went to Spain, Oviedo, Spain, where we saw the Sudarium, which was the face cloth that supposedly covered Christ's face. It was covered in blood and all kinds of different things. They would not allow anyone to touch it or authenticate it. We went to Bulgaria. This was fascinating. We went to Sozopol, to an island where the ruins, and it was snowy and icy and cold, but there was a 10th century church built on the ruins of a 4th century church. And underneath the altar, an archaeologist who used to be a Catholic priest knew that they would bury things under there to give the church power. And sure enough, when they found out where that 4th century altar was, they dug there, and there they found an ossuary box and in ancient Greek written on the side on another marble, like small piece, it said, "The bones of John." And as they opened it, this was in 2011 when they discovered it, there was 6 bones from the right-hand side of the body, which to Christians, it's important because that would have been the hand, because John the Baptist is who we're talking about, that would have been the hand that baptized Christ. And so they knew that these bones were a cousin of Jesus, because John the Baptist was a cousin of Jesus. So the scientists wanted to test those bones against the blood they had on the shroud.
Oh, wow. Wow, that
is
amazing.
incredible. And,
Yeah.
and were you there when the bones were discovered?
No, I was not. But the archaeologist who discovered the bones was there with us, and he was telling us the story. And those bones are being held in a Greek Orthodox church in Bulgaria. And they never bring them out. But for us, the priest brought this box and opened it, and there we could see the bones.
Wow, this is just too mind-blowing for me. So let's kind of reset it just for a minute, because it is so incredible what you're describing. The shroud was discovered in France several hundred years after the death of Christ. Is that right?
Correct.
So where is it now? Where is it kept? Is it on display, or is it kept behind the scenes?
The shroud is in Italy now. And I can't remember the exact, I think it was in the 70s or in the 80s when they would let people see it, and people lined up for miles to look at it, and they photographed it extensively. In fact, one of my instructors from Brooks Institute of Photography was there, and he photographed the shroud. And a lot of people would try to contact him to talk about the shroud, and he wouldn't want to talk about it or
Did you see it?
I did not see the shroud. So what we did for the show was the University of Padua, which is a very, very old university, arguably the oldest in Europe next to the University of Bologna. Padua has a cryogenic chamber there, a lot of things frozen inside, and they were given a scrap of fabric containing a blood stain of the shroud, from the Shroud of Turin, and there it was frozen in their cryogenic chamber. And so we were allowed to go to Padua, the university. They opened up the cryogenic chamber and then showed us the shroud that had the stain, the small particle that they had. And that's the sample that Oxford took for their DNA purposes to try to find the lineage of the blood that's on the shroud.
And so did they try to match it with the bones?
They wanted to, but I think the University of St. Petersburg, I want to say, were the ones that authenticated the bones, and also Oxford did back in the 80s. There was a little bit of a mishap, but they did prove that the bones were from a first century male, from the first century, and from the Middle East. They can determine from your blood DNA your race. So it was from a Middle Eastern man from the first century. And the church was not ready to let go of those bones for another test, so we couldn't use those bones in the test.
Wow.
But you traveled all through Europe.
Yep, and Israel. Oh, and then when we got to Israel, we went to the University of Tel Aviv, and there they have the only physical known evidence that the Romans would crucify anybody. We learned of crucifixion, of course, from the Bible, but there they have a foot on a piece of wood with a nail in it. And that's the only known evidence, physical evidence of crucifixion. Now that foot is not the foot of Jesus. It belongs to somebody else. And it's funny because during the time of crucifixion, people would take nails and things and hold them in their pocket for good luck charms and walk around with them after they had fallen to the ground. Wow. And so this was one piece they found in a tomb. So, we work around quite a bit, a lot of relics, and relics are funny because relics during the Holy Wars, the Crusades, 10th century, a lot of times these relics would come from the Holy Land into Europe, but a lot of them aren't real. A lot of them are fake, because, you have things like churches would use pieces of blood, or they'd say, we have a thorn from the crown of Christ, or we have a feather from an angel of God, in our church, or something with blood on it, or a holy relic. And they would name their church after that. Some are fake, some are real. Relics are powerful though, and it would draw people to come to the church. And if you believed, you believed. If you didn't, you didn't. So, but what we found from the blood on the shroud is that the pollen test showed that the fabric was from the the Middle East in the 1st century, and the blood on the shroud indeed was from a Middle Eastern man from the 1st century. And they ended up dating the blood on the shroud of Turin to a people called the Druze, a very old mountain people in Israel. And that basically is the end of the program.
But that is Oxford University doing it, so it's a legitimate analysis.
Yeah. Well, this is an area of interest for me. I watched 2 documentaries recently. One's called The Moses Controversy, and the other one's called something about the Exodus. I forget, but that's a great, I think, 12-year documentary. I really wish that we could go further into that. And I think we may have to have you on again, because it sounds like you have some amazing stories to share. But these next stories may not be as amazing as that one, but we want to get into some stories of the San Gabriel Valley.
So here is our SGV3. Yeah, you're right. It's not. It's not. We're not in the Antarctic but it's a beautiful place, Pasadena, San Gabriel Valley. We talked about it. What are some of your favorite things to do or places to go here in the valley?
Well, I love nature. I love food. I love art. There's quite a few things around here. All those things are fantastic. And of course, I've done quite a bit of traveling the world. I've worked in 68 countries around the world. I've eaten some of the greatest food, some of the craziest food you'd even know. So I love authentic food that tastes like I'm actually there. And so I have a lot of restaurants that I like. But also I like to, go out and explore nature and find animals and things. And there's a couple places like that I enjoy. But I just want to know, so can I name a couple restaurants that I think are good? Or am I
so we call it SGV3. So why don't you give us three really, it could be 3 restaurants. It could be 1 restaurant and 1 place you like to go.
Okay, this is what I'll do. So I love Indian food. India is one of my most favorite countries to visit. Of course, it's just surrounded in color and spices and old culture and archaeology and just wonderful. All India Cafe in Old Town Pasadena is one of my favorite restaurants. And Santok Kinda, he's the owner. He's a Sikh too. You'll see him in there with a turban and cooking.
He was my client at one point.
Oh, okay.
Was he really?
Yes, he was. So.
Oh, I really, really love him and his family. I'm close with them. I'd been going there so often, and then we ended up having a conversation just about India and traveling, and I became friends with his family. But what led me there was just their food, their chicken tikka marsala. Everything is great. Their naan they make. They make the best naan bread.
Okay, I'm hungry. Okay,
it's on Fair Oaks, right?
It is, and then they have a location in Glendale as well on brand. My other one that I love also too, another restaurant owned by a big family that I enjoy, that I speak with, President Thai. Have you been there on Rosemead?
Yes. Very.
My goodness.
Really good.
Really, 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 really good. I know one of the lead waiters there, his name is Thomas, really, really nice guy, very friendly. His family owns a restaurant. I talk with him all the time, but I love their Penang, their curries. It reminds me of working in Thailand.
Yeah, I've been there. I'm sure all of us have been there 100 times. Yeah,
yes.
It's a wonderful place, and the family is just a wonderful family there.
They're tremendous, and it's always packed.
It's always crowded.
And it's packed, too, with people that are from Thailand and all kinds of places. They really love the food there. It's wonderful. So I tend to go there a lot.
That's President Thai, East Pasadena on Rosemead Boulevard.
On Rosemead, yeah. Right near California. Yeah.
Wonderful food there. And then after a meal, I like to take a walk. So that's where I love Sierra Madre, and I love the walk on the Mount Wilson Trail. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just walk. I'll start, there's I'm again with the history, but there's an old stagecoach station there next to a park.
You're right.
In Sierra Madre, and the
Lizzie
trail
Parker's Inn, I think it's called.
Yeah, they do serve breakfast there sometimes and
do
stuff
they?
too.
See, I've never seen it open, and I always wonder. But Oh, that's great. So you walked the Mount Wilson Trail.
Oh, I love it. I did
That's my favorite. That's my favorite. And I should have had you there the day I almost stepped on a rattlesnake.
Oh my! Well, invite me next time. I'd love to come with you.
And the
help
other
that.
photo I did get of a bear sleeping in a tree there.
Yeah, you'll find so much wildlife. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people don't think of this area to have any wildlife because we're next to such a giant city and this and that. But there really is a lot going on. There's fox, there's bobcats, there's mountain lions, and of course, treat those animals with respect and stay away. But my favorite thing to do is, and I've got some amazing footage. I love, I like reptiles, but I also like amphibians. And if you get to the first water, there actually is a water and a waterfall there. And if you take time to look, you will find frogs in there. You will find salamanders. And you know what it makes me proud is that's the sign of a very healthy ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Those animals are like the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. They really let you know that the environment is clean. Otherwise, they couldn't be there.
Amphibians in particular.
They are very sensitive, and they breathe through their skin, and they need a clean environment to thrive. And when I go up and just even hike just to first water, which I think is just 3 miles or something like that, that first stop there, if you go in the stream and you take a look and you're really careful, and you look, you will find those guys swimming around, moving their tails around, showing their orange bellies and stuff. They're fantastic. They're newts, salamanders, newts, all those things. And then you'll find some frogs swimming in there as well. Just really, really clean and nice to see.
Wow. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing those. Those are definitely amazing places in the San Gabriel Valley. And for the listeners, if you've never gone to First Water, it's north on Baldwin off the 210. I think it's Miramonte, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a wonderful hike. You can go to First Water, or you can go all the way to Mount Wilson. That's quite a challenge.
And they've just, in the last year or two, developed a new trail to First Water, which I like better. Because,
where it forks off there to the left and goes up higher. Yeah, I've done that too.
Yeah,
That's
you
great.
kind of get a better view of everything. And that's a great hike.
We love it.
So Glenn, thank you for the amazing stories and for sharing, and especially, for bringing this treasure in to share with the listeners and with us. If someone wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Well, you can find me on my website at www.glennlewisevans.com. That's 2 N's in Glenn and Louis for Lewis.com. And my reel is there, my resume is there. And, I'm on Instagram, CDog297 on Instagram. You can find me and follow me on that page there. And you'll see a lot of photos of my work. And also, I'm a big collector. Wherever I go, I tend to try to collect something and bring it back to my home. So my home is just full of all kinds of strange things.
Oh, wow. Well, I really do hope that we can have you back, and maybe you can bring some other treasure to share and some other stories for the listener. So I really enjoyed that story. I hope you guys listening enjoyed that as well. That was pretty amazing and really insightful.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It was very exciting, very interesting. And again, thank you to our listeners for tuning in and being able to share in this great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, Glenn.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the SGV Master Key. You can find the full back catalog of the SGV Master Key at sgvmasterkey.com and wherever you get your podcasts. This show was produced and edited by Russell Mono and Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks again for listening or watching. We'll see you again real soon in the next episode.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.